My name is Marina Cole, and this is the story of a house, a prince, and a betrayal that almost broke a queen. For 25 years, my place on Birch Lane wasn't just a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in a quiet Columbus suburb. It was a kingdom. It wasn't bought with inheritance or luck. It rose out of overtime shifts, sleepless nights, and a promise I made to a small boy who had already lost too much. I was 30 when the world split. My husband Jacob, my high school sweetheart, died in a head-on collision on a rain-slick interstate. The knock at the door, the officer's measured voice, the way the hallway tilted, those things never faded. In an instant, it was just me and our 5-year-old son, Evan, and a future that felt like a cliff. In the numb months after the funeral, I made a vow Evan would have stability, safety, a home he could depend on when everything else wobbled. I worked days as a receptionist at a dental practice and nights keying data for a logistics firm. A thermos of coffee, my constant companion. Every spare dollar went into an account labeled Future. After 3 years of ramen coupons and saying no to anything with a price tag, a bank pre-approved me for a mortgage. When I held the keys to the tired little house on Birch Lane, peeling paint, overgrown shrubs, and all, I felt a kind of power I hadn't known since before Jacob's death. This was ours. I had kept my promise. We made the place a home in the way that matters. Evan and I painted walls together. His small blue handprints still faintly haunt the trim in what became his room. The first night, on a mattress on the floor, he pressed close and whispered, "I love our new house, Mom." That was my ribbon cutting. On his 10th birthday, we dug a hole in the backyard and planted a skinny oak. "This is yours," I told him, patting the soil. "As it grows, you will too." Every year it reached higher, branches spread like arms, learning how to hold the world. Years sped up. Evan grew into a sharp, kind young man and landed a full scholarship in computer engineering. I sat at his graduation fighting tears, pride swelling like a tide. He moved to Chicago, joined a tech startup, and met Sloan, sleek haircut, immaculate nails, a world of country clubs and ski houses in her rear view. Her parents, Victor and Elaine Whitmore, had crisp handshakes and smiles calibrated for photographs. I noticed Victor's eyes appraising my modest living room during their first visit. The way you study a used car you're not sure about. But Evan looked at Sloan like the sun had stepped into the room. That was enough for me. They married in a celebration that cost more than my down payment ever had. I smiled through the dazzle, feeling that tug every mother knows. The boy you raised is no longer just yours. He's building a life that includes you but doesn't orbit you. Not long after, my body mutinied. I was weeding around the oak when a steel band cinched my chest. The diagnosis? A severe blockage, immediate open-heart surgery, and a careful recovery. The night before I was admitted, Evan drove down. He found me at the kitchen table trying to pack a bag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "Mom," he said gently, "stop worrying. Focus on getting better." "What about the mail, the plants, the mortgage?" I asked. Always the accountant of small necessities. "I'll handle everything," he said, laying his hands on my shoulders the way I'd done for him 1,000 times. "Give me your keys. I'll get the bills, water the plants, keep an eye on things." The trust was easy, ingrained. I handed him the key ring, front door, shed, and the small silver key to the fireproof lockbox that held my deed, my will, the car title. I gave him the keys to the kingdom, and I did it with relief. Surgery went well. Recovery did not. The hospital was cold in the way that seeps into bone. Evan called every few days, brief, reassuring. "Everything's fine. Just rest." I pictured him mowing, scooping the mail, keeping the place humming. After 4 weeks, my friend Carol picked me up. The drive home felt like a pilgrimage. Then she pulled into my driveway and the air changed. The lawn was manicured in a way I never kept it. A sleek sedan I didn't recognize sat where my dented hatchback usually did. "You sure?" Carol asked. "It's my house," I said. But my voice had lost its certainty. I tried the lock. The key stuck like a memory that won't open. Again, nothing. The lock had been changed. Panic rose like a tide. I rang the bell. Victor Whitmore answered in a polo and practiced surprise. "Marina, what are you doing here?" "I live here," I stammered. "I just got out of the hospital. My key doesn't work." Evan appeared behind him. For a heartbeat, I saw my boy. Then something else settled into his features. Guilt, resolve, a kind of brittle annoyance. "Mom," he said, stepping onto the porch and pulling the door almost closed behind him. "We need to talk. Why is Victor here? Why is the lock changed?" He exhaled, finally meeting my eyes. "The house, it's not yours anymore. I signed it over to Victor and Elaine, temporarily, for legal and management purposes." The world tilted. "What?" "With your health, it made sense," he said, like he was repeating a briefing. "Their condo's being finished. The place was sitting empty. This is better for everyone." "Better for everyone?" My voice cracked. "Where are my things?" "In storage. We kept the essentials. I've set up a tour at a really nice assisted living place. Mom, you can't live alone anymore." It was like being evicted from my own life. I stared at him on the porch I had sanded with aching arms and cheap paper masks. I didn't see my son. I saw a stranger. "Don't come back," he said softly and closed the door. The motel room Carol found smelled like bleach and resignation. For 3 days, I dissolved. Grief piled on grief Jacob, my health, my home, now Evan. On the 4th morning, as a ribbon of sun cut through the blinds, something colder rose, anger with a spine. I made a plan. First stop, Ruth Kaplan, 60-something, sharp-eyed, an elder law attorney whose desk looked like a battlefield won nightly. I told her everything, my voice shaky at first, then steadying. "Marina," she said at last, "what your son did isn't only heartless. It's illegal. That's fraud. We'll get your house back." "How long?" I asked. "Lawsuit, discovery, court date. It could be 9 months to a year in a motel while strangers lived in my rooms? No. There's a faster approach," she said. "We file for an emergency injunction, illegal eviction, irreparable harm. It helps if we show bad faith in a way that's hard to ignore." I knew what she meant. Daylight. While Ruth drafted motions, I went to the library and wrote to Nadia Park, an investigative reporter at the local paper known for consumer protection stories. I didn't beg. I laid out facts. I was a widow, fresh out of heart surgery, locked out of my home by my son and his in-laws. I attached a photo of my deed and one of Evan and me planting that oak. She replied in 2 hours. We met the next day. I brought hospital discharge papers, a photo of the changed lock I'd taken on a shaky revisit, and the storage receipt that had been mailed to the motel unsolicited. I started building a wall of proof. The original deed, 25 years of mortgage statements printed and stacked like bricks, utility bills, property tax records, decades of photos in every room. A week after my exile, the convoy rolled up Birch Lane. Ruth's sedan, Sergeant Alvarez's sheriff's cruiser, and Nadia's car. Ruth handed Alvarez the signed court order. My hands were steady for the first time since the hospital. Victor opened the door, blustered, then froze at the sight of the badge. Elaine and Sloan hovered behind, faces tightening. Alvarez held up the document. By court order, immediate access is restored to Miss Marina Cole. You are currently trespassing. Evan shouldered forward, mortified anger flushing his cheeks. Mom, how could you bring the police? You're humiliating us. Humiliation, not homelessness. You told me to leave my own home, I said, clear and calm, my voice carrying down the street. On this porch, these boards I stained with my hands. You told the woman who gave you everything that she wasn't welcome. I turned slightly toward Nadia's notebook. This isn't a family misunderstanding. This is what happens when love is mistaken for weakness and sacrifice looks like opportunity. From my bag, I pulled a photo. 10-year-old Evan, grinning, dirt on his cheeks, hands on a sapling. I didn't just buy a house, I said. I built a kingdom for you, with overtime and heartache, with promises kept, and I am still its queen. Silence swept the porch clean. Evan stared at the picture and, for a breath, I saw recognition collapse his anger. He wasn't just looking at a photo, he was seeing the boy he'd been and the woman who had lifted him over every hurdle. Victor and Elaine said nothing. Confidence evaporated under the heat of paper and law. Alvarez cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, you have 30 minutes to gather personal items and vacate. Miss Cole will re-enter now. I didn't wait. I slid the new key Ruth had arranged a locksmith into my lock and turned. The click was the sweetest sound of my life. Inside, the air smelled wrong. Someone else's perfume, someone else's coffee, but beneath it was the familiar heartbeat of home. Mine. The lawsuit to unwind the fraudulent transfer dragged for months, but the war was settled on that porch. Evan and I are civil now. Bridges burned don't rebuild easily. Sometimes they get replaced by narrow footpaths you cross carefully. He's ashamed. I am resolute. If there is a lesson, it is not just for mothers or widows or homeowners. It is for anyone who has built something precious out of their own grit. Your trust is a treasure, not a tool. Document everything. Know your rights. Use your voice, even when it shakes. In the end, the strongest key you will ever hold isn't metal. It's the will to defend what is rightfully yours.